session, we're going to focus on making the most of targeted resume to robot-proof your resume. I want to start off with a sort of a quick introduction about what we mean by sort of robot-proof, and then we're going to take a deeper dive into this session. So I am Dr. Joseph Barber. I'm the Director of Graduate Career Initiatives here at Penn's Career Services. So when people think about the recruiting process, sometimes I think people imagine that every application that goes into an organization is viewed by someone, right? So that there's an opportunity for you to be seen by someone because they'll look at your application. And I think if you imagine some of the companies today and some of the roles that they have and the sheer number of people who are reaching out, it's just not possible to have a person or a team process every application that they receive. And there could be some really great ones and some not so great ones, but they won't get to the point where they can read all of them to be able to see either of those because it's an overwhelming number of applications. And so recruiting teams and hiring teams are looking for solutions to this challenge by utilizing technology, by making sure that there's an easy way to process the thousands, in some cases, of job applications to get down to the few that they actually want to take a look at. So it's not these piles of papers of resumes that are being printed out and looked at. There's a sort of a computer element to that. So applicant tracking systems are really the sort of the solution that organizations have come up with, and they're more complicated than I'm going to describe them here, but basically they are going to take the keywords from your applications and the keywords from each job that you might be applying to, and they're going to look to see how much of a match there are between those documents. Because at the end of the day, if your resume has none of the keywords from the job description, there's probably no point in paying someone to look at your material to make that assessment, right? So if you have no matches of any skills, you're not a good fit for the role. And so it's not worth someone taking the time to look at that application. So the software basically cuts out that process. They're scanning the keywords and they're looking for that match. So this is sort of the robot in the process, right? You come up with your resume, you translate all your skills onto a piece of paper, your virtual paper, your electronic paper, that gets sent off and submitted to the organization. Sometimes, your resume is the document that the keywords are extracted from. Sometimes they will ask you to cut and paste into fields as part of their application process. Every organization is different. Then, the robot decides what moves on to the hiring manager as part of that process. So it's very much, narrowing down the number of people that get through to the next stage based on arbitrary, semi-arbitrary conditions or filters that the software is using. So the software might prioritize different things. It might prioritize geographical location. It might prioritize different schools, right? You can set the software to sort of be focused on different elements of that experience or the experience that people bring. At the end of the day, once you're through the software, you are in the hands of the people. And if you get through the software, there's a greater confidence from these people, from the hiring team, that you have something that they're looking for, because the software has demonstrated that you do have some of the keywords, you've met some criteria, you have a 60% plus match to what they're looking for. So they will then have automatically more confidence that they're looking at something that's worth reading, which is good, because if you get to that point, they're going to spend more time taking a look at that. Now, many of you may have come across the platform called JobScan. They've done a good job of sort of pushing out their tool out there. This is a tool that you can use for free. You have sort of three free scans of your resume and a job description that you can use each month. I throw that out there because we used to sort of focus on this as a tool that people could use. However, we did then go ahead and bring this tool, the resume worded or the targeted resume tool, as a tool that you can use here at Penn. So this is sort of an opportunity for Penn students and postdocs to take advantage of this tool without having to pay anything. There are pro features of this tool that you cannot access, that we don't provide you for free, and I would not recommend using and paying money for. I'm going to show you the free features that you can use. The key to our arrangement with targeted resumes is that you have unlimited scans of your materials, as opposed to the 3 scans that you get from JobScan. So we'll talk about that. So let's dive in then to the targeted resume tool and walk through some of the key parts here. So on the Career Services website, if you search for targeted resume in our keyword search up here, or you go to the prepare application materials page, you'll come to targeted resume. You can click on this. It's going to open up your targeted window. It will ask you to sign in and set up a free account. Probably just with an email is fine in that case. Have I already logged in? Let's take a look. So the first thing it's going to ask you is to paste a job description. And so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the job description that I recently got here at Penn, and I'm going to post my resume and see how well those things match. So This is just a word paste document here. So here is the position, Director of Graduate Career Initiatives. Go next. Then it's going to ask me to upload a resume, and then it's going to go ahead and process this information. It only wants PDFs at this point, so just make sure you've converted it into a PDF. And it's going to go through the process of then scanning the keywords from that job description that I pasted and the resume that I provided myself. And then what it gives you is a score that is sort of your relevance score, showing how well you match. So first thing I recommend doing is just get a sense of what the platform is. So the show me around tool is great. It sort of points out what's going on. So here's the overall relevancy score. They recommend at least an 85 to be a sort of a good match for the position to get you past the software. 67, I could do some work here. They're going to talk about skills that you're missing, things that they've pulled from the job description that they said didn't seem to jump out, and things that you have covered. So it's helpful to know that you're doing a good job with that. And then there's a few things here I'll show you as part of the soft skills on the left-hand side that you can do. Again, just focusing on the free stuff that this platform allows you to do without paying. So the first thing then that I want to look at is sort of the missing keywords down here, right? So here's the job description. You can see the things that they pulled out from those keywords. Everything here is sort of things that I have not included in the same exact way in my resume, right? And that's sort of key too in terms of the software. You can see that recruiting and recruitment are two different words, two different styles of words. I may have mentioned recruit, for example, or a version of the word that isn't the same as those. The software isn't necessarily smart. It's not always going to pick up variations of the keyword. It depends on the platform that they're using. So when they flag a word that you know that you've used, it may be a different version of that word that you want to try to change in your resume to make sure that you're matching the way that they've described it in the job description. But there's lots of found keywords that I have here that I have been able to match in terms of my skill set. So that's a good thing. The key skill might be in terms of the frequency that it's measured. So that's why they're focusing on that aspects. You can see, again, that the keywords are listed on this side, so you can put them into context. Sometimes they flag a word that just makes no sense, and it's describing the building itself as opposed to the skills that they're looking for. And again, you can see the resume that you're working with here. How to add skills just gives you some descriptions and some tools to think about what you can be doing, so you can expand on these sort of bits of advice to talk about that. On this left-hand side here of this column, you can see that they've tried to customize some of their advice to. So they talk about outreach and associate directors. They talk about incorporate skills like website management strategy. This is important for managers, right? So applying for a director level position, and they talk about how management and being a director are important down here. So this is slightly customized just to give you some advice on how to structure your approach there. The softer skills allow you to sort of think about how you might integrate words that are important without just saying the words themselves, right? So they recommend that you don't use some of these keywords directly. You don't use buzzwords necessarily, but you find ways of integrating them into the narrative by describing how you've done that, as opposed to what it is that you've done, right? So from their perspective, softer words aren't necessarily part of the relevancy score that you saw earlier on, my 67 out of 100. But these are things that you should be thinking about as, well, how can I demonstrate this? Not how can I use this word directly, but how can I demonstrate this core skill set or this attribute as part of what I'm doing? The hard skills, again, that's what contributes to the score. So in terms of the missing keywords, what I can do here is I can actually go straight to my resume and I can say, well, I have done some of these things, right? I have done website management and I have done data management, right? So I'm just going to throw it in anyway here, but you can throw it in somewhere that you think makes sense. And I'm just going to use the keywords, which obviously is not what you're going to do. You're going to have to find a sentence and a way to describe that. But if I were to type in, website, management and data management, it's going to demonstrate now that I have these skills, right? So it's going to figure out that those are things that I have. I can see those changes here, so I can save any changes I make to my resume and make sure that I go back to my actual version of my resume and include them. But then I can also see how my score has improved just with like 3 more keywords that are hard skills. And now I'm a 95, right? So this is not a subtle tool, or rather the applicant tracking systems aren't subtle tools, right? Changing a few words isn't going to increase the likelihood that I'm going to get the job. It's going to increase the likelihood that I'm not kicked out of the process before someone actually reads my position. So, it's important that you realize that these are part of the process to get you past the robots, but not the things that will, when the reader looks at it, because obviously if I just write website management and data management, that doesn't mean anything. It's not actually contextualized experiences. You have to find a way to integrate that into a narrative, but your goal is to make sure that those things are actually included in that process. So you get to play around with it and tweak it and do all these things and sort of figure out other ways to make sure that you are doing that effectively. Now, I'm actually going to post just another job description, just as an example. Obviously, my resume was customized to the job that I applied for. I did get the job, which I'm very happy about. But let's take another job that's out there. So this job is Director of the Future of Work Responsibility. So it's a career and professional focused role. It's a direct level position again. Let's see how I do in terms of my skill set. So I'm going to throw this in there. And then I'm going to upload my resume again, just quickly. So my score for this position at Meta is actually a 21, which means I have a lot of work to do if I wanted to work here at Meta. So if we look at the keywords that I'm missing, there's lots of things that I haven't touched on: change management, people analytics, business processes. When I was looking at this as a test case earlier, I noticed that leading cross-functional teams here in the job description isn't pulled out as a keyword. And I think cross-functional teams is a key keyword. And so, again, it just illustrates that this software doesn't actually know what it's talking about. It doesn't know all the words that are important. You can update it, you can customize it, but it's not a perfect system. You're just trying to maximize the likelihood that you do have those keywords that are out there. It's also important to note that if the job description says Microsoft, Excel, or Access as key skills, and you write Office, I have experience in Office, the software isn't going to say, oh, well, because you have Office, it means that you can do Access and Excel, right? So you do have to bring it down to those keywords that they are using in the job description as part of that. So that's, my match is a long way from 85%. So I do want to make sure that, I've done some work if I was going to apply for this one. When you see words like cross-functional, you do have to understand what it actually means before you can make changes to your resume, right? You can't just take cross-functional and stick it into your resume as if you know what that means. You have to know what it means in industry. You have to know kind of what it means in Facebook or at Meta. And so some research, some networking to try to figure out what that means will give you a better way to make sure that when the human reads your resume, that they see the skills necessary for cross-functional work illustrated in the things that you've actually done. Because it would be weird, I think, to say, oh yes, in my PhD, I performed cross-functional research in that way. Not out of the you could potentially have done it in that way if you framed it sort of accurately working across different divisions. But chances are, as a student or as a postdoc, you probably haven't done something that would be termed cross-functional in the same way that it's done in industry. So understanding what it means allows you to get closer to that when you're describing your experience, so that a human can value that part of the process. I thought it would also be interesting. So again, you can do this multiple times for your materials, but we can also just do a general sort of resume review just to see what it says about my resume and how that might stand out there. So the resume review is just going to take your resume in isolation and say, well, let's take a look at it and see how it fits into what's going on. So we're going to click on Score My Resume, and then again, we're going to throw in my resume to this box here and see what it says. Now, again, I work as a career advisor. I give advice on resumes all the time. So I'm expecting, at least 150% score on my resume, see what they say. So the general resume is not going to be your most helpful tool, obviously, because you do need to customize it for different types of applications, but it may give you a sense of where you can focus your attention on as you are updating it, as you may want it for, your career fairs that you may be going to or handing out as part of your networking process. So I wouldn't overinvest on making a perfect general resume. I would tend to focus on the targeted version of this. So 31 sounds terrible for my resume. So I'd love to know, why they think that is the case in this context. So as we go through this, you'll see that there are sections that say these are pro features only. This is not what you get as your free use, as the thing that we provide you. And I would not recommend getting that from this software because it's like $49 a month or something. If you want to do that for 1 month, just when you're in an active phase, that's up to you. There can be benefits to it. What we do in one-on-one sessions with you is basically what the software is doing, but I think sometimes we can be more nuanced as part of that process. So 33, let's take a look at the sort of the line by line feedback to see what's going on here. So we can do a line analysis of what's going on, which takes me through all of these different bullet points that I have and gives me input on it, right? So I get 7 out of 10 for this, could be improved, should start with an action verb. Advocated was my action verb, but I put successfully there to sort of upfront the outcome. There's good quantitative figures there. So you can do this and get sort of general feedback. You can get sort of general advice about how to have skill, context, outcome style approaches with this as you go through this, just to keep that in mind. And you can get a sense of what some of the general issues might be with this resume as you go through, as with the bullets as you go through. Again, this is a automated search and response to your resume. So there aren't nuances around this. It's going to say that my resume is too long because it's 2 pages, but it also doesn't reflect the fact that as an internal candidate for this role, people knew who I was, and I wanted to make sure that to remind them of all the things that they knew that I'd done. So, you know, your specific approach is going to be somewhat unique. So line analysis, I think, is going to be helpful. We can then jump over to the impact statements and see what's going on over here. So quantifying impact, let's see what they say about that. So you can see from their scan that they've pulled out things that seem to be quantified and things that are not. So you can get a sense of how well you've integrated numbers into your bullet points. Sometimes numbers are good because they add tangible elements to what you're doing. I completed this analysis that resulted in 3 publications or whatever it is. That 3 is more meaningful than just saying publication. So I have some good aspects here in terms of going through that and seeing what is there. Repetition, it's saying that I have some keywords that are used multiple times, developed, provide, and sponsored. So that's just good because sometimes I do see resumes where every other bullet point is the same word, analyze, 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 and it gets sometimes overwhelming to look at the same thing over and over again. So seeing when that jumps out and seeing someone point you out is going to be helpful. Repeated phrase is also good. You don't want to say exactly the same thing at multiple experiences because it just makes it seem less impactful as part of that experiences. Action verbs, they do provide a bunch of action verbs that you can play around with here. These are all great things, but obviously you need to be pulling from the job description more so than just an action sounding verb. But these are just give you an idea about how to vary some of the things that you're already talking about that might be helpful. Brevity, I got a low score here. They're saying my resume is too long. I explained why I thought that I could get away with that because people know me already and there's lots of stuff that I need to be able to illustrate for this new role that I wanted to get across there. So that was that. For the bullet points, I have bullet points. I've used those. There's a free template here if you want us to do that. I don't believe templates are going to be helpful for you, so you don't feel like you have to align with with those types of things. But these are just helpful ways to sort of play around with this. Again, that's a pro feature that we don't need to play around with. Total bullet points, more than the recommended number in the core section. So saying that I'm wordy and I'm going into too much detail maybe. Again, especially when it comes to sort of a 1-page version, you do have to be strategic with the number of bullet points. So just being aware of that, I think, is important. But sometimes you do need to communicate information to the humans. The software doesn't care what the nuances of what you've done, but sometimes what you've done is critical to the role and the hiring managers need to see that in that instance. So making sure that that's there as well. Style, 29, so buzzwords, let's see what this is all about. So remove vague buzzwords and cliches from your resume. So these are some of the softer skills that they talked about where they said don't use the words directly. What you'll see here is that some of my buzzwords are actually in my summary section up front where I wanted them to be because they weren't illustrating specific experiences. They were themes that I wanted to touch on in the rest of the resume. So in this case, this is my explanation to you. My buzzwords are important because they get in the mind of the reader as they're reading through the rest of the resume. These are the conclusions that I want people to walk away with. And then in the rest of the resume, I'm going to illustrate what that actually looks like. Contact information looks good, email, LinkedIn profile, so it's going to recommend those types of things. Again, you don't really need a physical address anymore, right? People aren't going to write to you. Just a city and a state is probably fine in our semi-virtual hybrid world, but giving out your address to people who don't need it, I think, is a best practice to avoid anyway. So, that's helpful. And then sections, not too bad in sections. So I have an experience section, relevant and professional experience, fix my education section, let's see what they say here. Remove older education experiences. To prevent age discrimination, remove older graduation dates if they're over 15 years ago. Well, that's not very nice. Happy with my graduation dates there. But again, you can think about that, not an issue that you're necessarily going to face yourselves, but can be a key part of the process of making sure that you do get through the robots to get to the hands of the person who can make an assessment of the skills and the abilities that you bring to a particular role. And I think that sort of covers most of the things. So these are the hard skills that they feel like they've pulled from the job description. They say at the end that, you know, these aren't necessarily all hard skills, but they just want to illustrate some of the keywords that jump out from the document that aren't the filler words, the thes and the ands and the things like that. So it's just nice to see those sort of spelled out in front of you so that you can get a sense of what are some of the takeaways that someone might have for this document. So a nice thing to play around with there if you wanted to do that.